Hello aspirants and welcome again to Legacy IAS Academy. As the mains examination has started, so here we are with the analysis of the mains paper of 2025. So in this lecture, we will be dealing with the analysis of GS mains of Indian society. The topic of Indian society is what we will deal over here. So this is a part of your GS1. Under it, the topic is Indian society. It is also known as social issues as well. Now, what has been the trend of this particular subject? So if you see, for the last few years, there were easily around 8 to 9 questions that were being asked. So it was close to, in fact, more than 100 marks, 100 or more marks was being covered only by Indian society in GS1. So your GS1 consists of your history, which consists of world history, modern history, art and culture, as well as geography, etc. In that alone, the Indian society was playing a big role. Now that amount of weightage to some extent has now been reduced, as we are seeing now around 6 questions coming directly from the Indian society. So you can see that 2 to 3 questions as per the last 5 years, last 3 years of average has now been reduced. So that is one thing. Will this trend continue and there will be further reduction, or there is a possibility of a resurrection of 8 to 9 questions maybe in the next year? It is anybody's guess, but as of now the questions has been reduced as compared to the last couple of years. Now moving ahead with respect to the type of questions, the question type is analytical. Yes, it is quite analytical. It is not directly related to the current affairs. However, current affairs does help over here. But previously, let's say 5 years back, the questions in Indian society were such that it could be answered directly from the current affairs perspective, but now current affairs alone is not going to cut it. You will be required to have the static knowledge as well as the analytical ability is of high importance to solve Indian society question. However, so the level remains medium. However, the level to some extent has been reduced as compared to 2023 or 2025 Indian society paper. Yes, in fact, I would say that the 2023 and 2024 Indian society paper, I would also say that the 2024 Indian society paper was one of the toughest in the last 15 years, as you will see. So that level of toughness to some extent has been reduced by UPSC. So without further ado, let's get started with each and every question that has been asked in GS1 mains of 2025 in Indian society. Now, before we move on to that, an important announcement of the new batches that will start from the 9th and 11th of August have already started. Now, in the month of September, the batches are going to start, September and October, which will be regular as well as weekend batch. Now, what is the difference? The regular batches go on weekdays, whereas for working professionals or aspirants who are still studying, the weekend batch is important, wherein only Saturday and Sunday the classes are conducted. Now, certain advantages when you enroll with Legacy IAS Academy is the comprehensive coverage of all the papers at a microscopic level. The most important thing here would be the one-on-one mentorship that is provided here at Legacy IAS Academy. In addition to that, you have only 40 students per class. Less than that, there will never be a situation wherein you will have more than 40 aspirants. There will be daily answer writing practice in addition to the prelims and mains test series that is already there. Now, one very important thing is the 360-degree coverage of current affairs, wherein one entire day per week is given to only current affairs live classes to take care of all your current affairs needs. So this is how we prepare you at Legacy IAS Academy. If you want to enroll with us, you can simply download our new app or log on to our website, that is www.legacyIAS.com, or call on these numbers. So let's get started with the very first question. Now here, understanding the question is very important, and I'm also going to tell you where the students are going to commit mistakes. So keep that in mind. right, and understand where the mistakes can happen so that you can avoid them in your examination. So let's get started with the very first question, which was actually question number 8. Now the question says, how does smart city in India address the issues of urban poverty and distributive justice? So they are talking about smart city in India as a tool for what? A tool for addressing the issues of what? Remember, urban poverty. So they are not being generic in nature and talking about poverty. They are specifically talking about urban poverty. So make sure your answer has points related to urban poverty specifically, and how it also addresses the issue of distributive justice. So both of the thing needs to be addressed. Now, generally, the students would try to address both of them together in general, 2 points for this, 2 points for that, and again another point for urban poverty. If you do that, that is also fair enough. But how do you get more marks than others? So you have to be very crystal clear. First, mention about urban poverty, mention how that issue is addressed, then mention about distributive justice, and then mention how that issue is addressed. Now, when you talk about any negative externality or criticism, maybe at that time you can combine the two and write, because it's just 150 words, and then you can give a consolidated solution for both of them. But when you're talking about the addressing of the issues of urban poverty and distributive justice, make sure that you segregate both of them and write under two different headings. If you have not written the heading directly, that's not a problem, but two headings could be there, right? So that is very important. That is how you will get more marks than others. Now, what about the introduction? So introduction can be sort of a paradox, urban paradox, wherein the growth is happening but inequality and poverty, you can talk about poverty still remains, right? Inequality still remains, distributive justice is still an issue. So that is how your introduction could be, which is in 150 marker. Please remember, your introduction can play a role of directly attacking the question itself, and your solutions could be merged with conclusion and written together, because you have paucity of words. The words are only 150. So I hope that's clear. So this is how you start. First, you talk about the introduction. In introduction, you will be talking about the paradox that exists, that India is growing but inequality is still there, and distributive justice. So distributive justice was, if it's not there, it is going to lead to inequality. So you can mention the paradox over here in round about 15 words. Be very simple and straightforward. You will be attracted to write, amazing rosy words and phrases, quotes. Avoid that. It's going to eat up your words and not going to address the question. Then you go on to the main body of the answer. You will go on to the main body of the answer. Now here is where the main thing is, because your conclusion here can be sort of your solution as well. As I said, we have lack of words over here. So again, around 15 to 20 words of conclusion is fair enough. Conclusion might increase, may go to 25 words, because you are also about to write solution along with it. So I can consider up to 25 per words of conclusion. So here your 140 words are gone, and your main body is going to have around 110 to 120 words will be here. Now this is where first you talk about how it is going to address the issue of urban poverty. So you're going to talk about that, how it's going to address the issue of urban poverty. So you basically focus on the smart city, creating a lot of jobs, creating employment for the unemployed people, the unskilled, semi-skilled, skilled personnel, laborious construction, infrastructure field, all these things, and the domino effect thereabout. You talk how it is going to address. Then you talk about the distributive justice. Distributive justice, as in the growth is going to further increase, it is going to be a linkage which will lead to prosperity. Then how the distribution of this growth can be fairly distributed among the people. So this is addressing your main part, and this would be around 90 to 100 words is what you will write. Now 20 words of criticism or challenges is necessary, Yes, so remember, the framework is of course important, but in the framework you also have to focus how much weightage you have to give. So we are also discussing the weightage as well, because if the main body urban poverty and distribution justice, if you are talking about smart city as a tool and only 40-50 words over there and more on challenges, you may not get good marks, because it is to be focused on how does, because the question is what, how does smart city in India address the issue of urban poverty and distributive justice. So major discussion is going to be about these 2 points, how they are addressed by smart city mission, and then another 20 words of challenges, and then 20 to 25 words of solution, which will also be your conclusion. So this is how you address the very first question of Indian society. Let's move on to the next. So this is about the civil services, ethos of civil services. So let us see what this talks about. The ethos of civil services in India stand for combination of professionalism with nationalistic consciousness elucidate. So here there is not much scope of talking about critique, negativity, etc., but rather the focus should remain on how the ethos of Indian civil services is nothing but the combination of professionalism with nationalistic consciousness. You have to elucidate that, illustrate that, so you will have to write examples over here for that. Now here also, please be very clear that first you address the professionalism and then the nationalistic consciousness, and whenever you are addressing that, give an example here, give an example here as well. So this is something that needs to be kept in mind, right? So how do you attack this question? First, of course, talking about the issue in not the issue, of course, talking about the main point of the question. So talking about professionalism and nationalistic consciousness, how they can go hand in hand and address the governance requirement of the country, of the diverse country like India. And then within this, you are going to first talk about the professionalism. The professionalism, in professionalism you are going to be talking about the probity in governance. You can take cues from your ethics paper, GS4 paper, use terminologies from your GS4 over here in your answer, but don't become too GS4 technical, don't use too much technical words as such, but a couple of words will not harm us over here. So you talk about the probity in governance, you talk about non-partisanship, right? You talk about, very important if you're talking about professionalism, SOP, that is standard operating procedure. So all these things, now this needs to be clubbed with your nationalistic consciousness, your nationalistic consciousness. Now how do you do that? You ensure that what all you are following over here is in sync with the constitutional requirement. It does not go against the constitutional values. You are going to uphold these values, you are going to give them primacy, and there will be a synergy that will be created with this. Now give one example over here and another example over here, right? Now in subsequent to this, you can, in the introduction maybe around 15 words, in the conclusion also you can use 15 words. Here solution as such may not be required, so your conclusion can focus on aspiration and goal oriented or positive approach, and you will have around 120 to 130 words to address over here about the professionalism along with an example, and nationalistic values along consciousness along with the example. Remember, since they have said elucidate, so example becomes very necessary over here. So this is how you are going to address this question. Let's move on to the next one. Question number 10, again a 10 marker. The question asks, do you think that globalization results in only an aggressive consumer culture? Justify your answer. Now whenever you hear the keyword like do you think, please do not start your answer with yes I do, no I don't, and Also make sure that you don't show just one side of it and forget the other side. You need to address both the sides. Now something can be more and something can be less. For example, your agreement to this statement can be more rather than the disagreement, but please make sure agreement and disagreement both has to be there. Nothing in this world, there might be some exceptions. If you know, please let us know in the comment section, but generally nothing in this world is completely positive or completely negative. There are going to be multiple sides of the same thing, so you have to mention both the side. Even if you think no, it has only led to aggressive consumer culture, and you write just that, the evaluator will be like, you do not know the other side of it, right? And if you say that no, it has not happened, then again the evaluator will say that you are probably unaware. So we have to give both the sides. Now to what extent you agree and disagree, it's up to you, because they have asked you that what do you think about it. So the percentage can be 50-50, the percentage can be 70-30 also, but try to be very logical and rational. For example, if I am being given this question, do you think that globalization results in only an aggressive consumer culture? For me, it is going to be straightforward that yes, in a sense that it does. I'll give the examples how it does, and then I'm going to however say, however, it has led to certain other things as well beyond consumer culture. For example, this, and this. And then I am going to conclude by talking about how the aggressive consumerism can be rather instead of this impact, how it can get certain other positive impact as well, and conclude my answer over there. All right, so this is how you have to address this question. So first you can talk about the critique or the issue as to why this is being asked, because consumerism is on the rise as a result of this question is there, right? So first you can talk about globalization has led to, for example, McDonaldization or Coca-Colization of the various countries including India. So that could be your introduction, wherein we are agreeing that yes, consumer culture, aggressive consumer culture has resulted due to globalization. So what do we write? We write the concept of McDonaldization and Coca-Colization. These kind of words you should know in order to use them in your answer. So you don't have to explain much, just two words and you have said a lot without using much words. Now the first part of the question, so this becomes your introduction. Then in the main body you are going to talk about aggressive consumer culture. This is what you are going to talk about. Here you are going to talk about the overspending, the over buying, all these things and how this has happened. So you are going to talk about that, right? Then you talk about beyond consumerism. So if you use 15 words here, 15 words here, see in every answer I'm going to talk about the wordings. Keep that in mind. It tells you how much the weightage should be. So you're left with 120 words of the main body. So in aggressive consumerism, you can utilize around 60 to 70, in fact 70 to 80 words. Around 80 words you can talk about, because to a major extent you are agreeing to it, but then you connect this with the next part saying that however there are certain achievements, or there are certain things beyond aggressive consumer culture as well. So what are they? Mention those points 1, 2, 3, wherein you will be using around 40 words over here, right? So try to write certain positives over here. For example, increase in production, increase in the employment. It has addressed poverty by creating employment, right? The lifestyle has increased. You talk about all those positive things as well, and then you conclude talking about how globalization can further strengthen or lead to more positives than negatives. So that is how your conclusion is going to be about, right? I hope this is clear. Let's move on to the next. The next question talks about question number 18. Now this is a 15 marker. This is a 15 marker question. It's asked, how do you account for the growing fast food industries, given that there are increased health concerns in modern society? So what they are saying, okay, even though there are increased health concerns. See, first part of the answer writing is to understand the question. So let's understand what it's trying to say. The question says that the boss, there is increase in health concerns in modern society, but still the fast food industries are growing. Why? Why is that happening? Why is that happening when that is not good? Recently the online gaming bill or etc. These things have come. So the question could have been that online gaming is harmful, but still why is it increasing? So that is the kind of question we are being asked, that the fast food is causing increased health concerns in the modern society, but still why the fast food industry is growing still. So about that they ask you, illustrate your answer with Indian experience. So you have to give example and that of Indian experience. I hope that's absolutely clear. So first things first, your introduction. See here where you need a bit about fact, the growth of the fast food industries, or the extent, the scope, the capital, the market capitalization of fast food industry. If you like that, it will be really good. Or you talk about the issues that it has created. For example, India has now more proportion of non-communicable diseases, that is lifestyle diseases, and the junk food or the fast food plays a very important role in that. However, still the fast food industry is growing because of this reason, 1 2 3 4 5 whatever, right? So this could be your introduction. Then you talk about, then you account for the growth. Now don't write these kind of heading is as such not required, I'm just writing it to explain you. Account for the growth of the fast food industries. So how do you account for it? Number one, you talk about the increased per capita income. Now people have more per capita income, more and more people are now habitual of eating fast food, junk food, they can afford it. Next, you can talk about the apps that make it easy for you, for example, you have the aggregator app like Swiggy, Zomato, etc., which makes it easier for you to keep on having junk food. Now this is a society question, so let's bring in certain social aspects as well. For example, now there is increase in labor force participation. I'm just explaining the point, you have to write it in very less words. Now there is an increased labor force participation of females as well. So historically the sexual division of labor was there, wherein the females were required to do the household work including cooking of food. Now since they are also involved in earning income, so there is more prevalence of ordering food online, or buying outside food, eating outside, so on and so forth. So increased consumption due to reduced time, reduction in the time that is available for the people to cook their own food. So all these things you are going to talk about. Plus also start using words like westernization in the sense that whatever happens in the Western world we consider it to be modern, and then we start incorporating that. And they also use basically the soft power, the advertisement, the marketing and all to basically nudge us to do all that. So you talk about the marketing, the advertisement, so on and so forth, which nudges you to do so, right? So this is what you're going to talk about. You're going to give examples in the Indian experience, right? Now what do you write? Is this the only thing that you are going to write about it? No, of course not. So this is the major part. So you are using 20 words for introduction, you are going to use 20 words for conclusion, so you are left with 210 words. Now in those 210 words, your 125 words are going to be used for this. Now you are left with around 85 words. In that you talk about certain other things. How can, in fact, 150 words you can use for that, and then you are left with around 60 words. So you can talk about how this issue can be addressed, and you talk about how it can be addressed and what can be the best way forward, and conclude your answer over there. I hope that's clear. So you can talk about the positives that can be gotten from this and your conclusion. So it is to some extent a unidimensional question. That is why examples and good points are going to be very important for your answer writing over here. So this is how you address question number 18. Let's move on to the next question, that is 19th. The question is achieving sustainable growth with emphasis on environmental. So achieving sustainable growth with emphasis on environmental protection could come into conflict with poor people's need in a country like India. So if you want to have sustainable growth and emphasizing on environmental protection, you may be in conflict with poor people's need in a country like India. So how do we introduce by talking about the development environment paradox, that if development is there, environment is disregarded, and if development is there, it is the poor people who are kicked out of the region, right? So you are basically going to talk about the paradox that is there, the conflict that is there. Around 20 to 25 words you can use, because you are also giving a good platform for your answer. Now this is your introduction, similar will be your conclusion, so you will be left with 200 words. So now you are asked to comment. Now since you are asked to comment, you are majorly going to agree with the statement, and to some extent you can also disagree. So let's talk about the agreement part, the conflict dimension. First, the energy excess. The cheaper source of energy will be more polluting, you give example, and the renewable energy sources are basically more costly, and that is why the financial excess of those energy is not there. You are going to talk about that. Then industrial regulation. If too much of environmental regulation was put forward, small industries will be out of the business, as a result of which the employment will be gone. So it will lead to unemployment, again harming the poor laborers that are there. Conservation versus livelihood. When you talk about conservation, but the tribal people, for example, poor people who live in the forest, who rely on the forest produce, the minor forest produce, if they are not able to pluck it, take it, save it and export, or let's say sell it off, then their livelihood will be in danger. So you are going to talk about that as well. So you are going to talk about then the cost of green technology. It is very high, so it is going to make things costlier, again difficult for leading to inflation, which is difficult for poor to survive. And then you talk about specifically the urban poor, so on and so forth. So these are the points that you are going to talk about with respect to the conflict dimension. So 120 words can be used over here. Now you are left with 80 words. Now in that 80 words, what you have to do is around 50 words you can be conflicting it, right? That there is a positive synergy is possible through sustainable livelihood, decentralized renewables, inclusive growth models, so on and so forth. So this is in fact 50 to 60 words. And then finally you talk about how it is done, how it can be done. You are going to talk about that in 30 words. And then finally you are going to conclude your answer. I hope this is clear. So this is how you are going to address this particular question. Now the last question is about the development projects, right? The development projects. So let's see. The question says, does the tribal development in India center around two axes? What are these two axes? Displacement and rehabilitation. Displacement and rehabilitation. Give your opinion. Now they have asked you to give your opinion. Again, you can choose to completely agree, completely disagree, but avoid complete agreement and complete disagreement. Have to some extent the agreement and to some extent disagreement. Now it depends upon you to what extent. So here majorly you can agree to this, but then to some extent you have to disagree, and then provide a best possible solution, way forward, and conclude your answer. So this is how you are going to address this particular question. So let's look at the question again. Does the tribal development in India center around two axes? Those of displacement and rehabilitation. So first you talk about the introduction, which talks about the development projects which are there, the dams, the mines, industries, sanctuaries, etc., which are historically linked to the displacement of the people, which then further needs rehabilitation, as a result of which, yes, it is relying on the two basic axes. So first let's start about the detail of the dominant axis. The first one is displacement. So you talk about how it is with respect to displacement, how it revolves with respect to displacement, because whatever has happened is, whenever any such development projects have come, people have been displaced. So what issues have they faced, right? and what development they might need, and then talk about the rehabilitation as well, the issue and the concerns of their rehabilitation, how they have been rehabilitated and what have been the issues with respect to rehabilitation. You can add certain value added points over here. For example, whenever they are rehabilitated, they are not akin to do, let's say, certain other jobs. They were just dependent on the forest that they were living in. So it's not just a loss of land, it is a loss of livelihood, a loss of complete lifestyle for them. That is why they find it really, really difficult to sustain their life. And in certain scenarios, when the compensation packages are given, you see an increase in the child marriages in certain societies, because they get some lump sum money. They find this is the best time to get their daughters married off and give the dowries. So even a young female child is married off. So these kind of issues you can talk about, and this is the thing that the government has focused upon majorly. Right, then you give the counter perspective also, that this is not the only thing. There are things beyond displacement and rehabilitation. You talk about the human development, the education system, right, the Poshan Abhiyan, etc., the political empowerment through the 5th and 6th schedule of the Indian Constitution, the cultural preservation wherein the language, art, identity, etc. are safeguarded, the Forest Rights Act, etc., which gives certain rights, the sustainable livelihoods wherein the minor forest produce is provided to the forest dwellers, to the tribal people, in order to sustain their life. For example, you can talk about the tendu leaves which are used in BDs, in tobacco products. You can talk about that, ecotourism, etc., by giving the examples. Right. So now, before you conclude, you are going to critically review what you have just said. Talking about excessive focus on development and rehabilitation is a narrow framework, because it ignores a lot of other things. It marginalizes the people, ecological fragility is there. In fact, to the tribal people, there is also economic fragility, etc. So the conclusion could be certain. You talk about certain solution, and then you conclude in a positive manner. So this is how you can address this particular question. So overall, though I have mentioned that it was medium, but I would say yes, medium. A couple of questions can be said to be very easy, but majority of them are medium, and this is considerably easier than the last year's 2024 paper. So I hope all of you who have given the paper have done really, really well in this, and those who want to give in the future are focusing on this particular lecture to further improve your answer writing. Thank you.